Okay, all set.
Okay, Chair Lager, take it away.
All right, we're live. Good evening and welcome to the August 13th meeting of the City of Kalamazoo Zoning Board of Appeals, a volunteer advisory board appointed by the City Commission. Mr. Eldridge, are there any announcements or changes to the original agenda? Oh, you're on mute, Pete.
There are no changes, thank you. There are no changes to the agenda for tonight. Neil, are we gonna have the number up on the screen like we normally do, the call-in number? There it is, thank you. So yeah, so for those listening in, those watching this video feed, we have a call-in number for the public comment, and we do have automated prompts now, so you can select the prompt for the particular public hearing you would like to leave the comment for. And that number again is 269-226-6573. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now move on to the acceptance of the July 9th, 2020 minutes. Are there any changes to the minutes? No. May I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as written.
Is there a second?
Second.
A second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed, same sign. The minutes are approved. I'll now explain our procedure for tonight's public hearing. For each request, the secretary will read the application into the public record. The applicant or representative will then have 10 minutes to provide their comments. Following that, we will close the public hearing on the request. Once the public hearing is closed, after Pete, help me out here. After the applicant speaks, we then open it up for the telephone calls?
Yeah, we'll do staff comments and then we'll open it up for the public comment that's come in via the voicemail messages.
Okay, so let me just repeat that. We will first invite the applicant to present. They will have 10 minutes to present. Then we'll ask for staff comments from the City of Kalamazoo. And then we'll listen to the comments that people leave on the voicemail. And again, if you want to leave a comment, that's 269-226-6573. Once the public hearing is closed, we will conduct what is called a finding of fact, where the board will state what they believe the facts of the request are. The board must approve the finding of fact. Therefore, the first vote that is made will be on the finding of fact and not a ruling on the case. The board reserves the privilege to ask questions of people who have already spoken, even though the public comment portion is closed. Once discussion is ended, the board will move on to a roll call vote. A full board consists of 6 members with 4 votes required to grant a non-use variance or a use variance. Tonight we have 5 members, so it still requires 4 members to approve a variance request. Ms. Doan, you've been out. Will you please now read the first application into the record?
Certainly. An application for a variance for provisions of the zoning ordinance has been filed with the Zoning Board of Appeals by Daniel Edlund, owner of 1705 Lay Boulevard, which is situated in Zone RS5 Residential Single Dwelling District. The applicant is requesting a use variance from Chapter 4, Section 4.1 to utilize this structure as a duplex due to the floor plan and prior use of the structure as a duplex years ago. However, RS5 zone does not permit duplexes. Please note this request will not change the zoning classification of the property. This is a request for variance only regarding the item described above.
Thank you. Mr. Edlund?
Hi. Well, I want to be
courteous and conscientious with everybody's time. I don't want to ramble on too long, but I guess about 80 days ago, 1705 Lake Boulevard was purchased. Our intent was to fix it up, and we've been in that process so far, doing as much as I think we could until we know which direction we're going with it, as a single family or a 2-unit. The unit, as was mentioned, has a kitchen upstairs and one down, locking doors at the top of the stairs and the bottom of the stairs. The kitchen upstairs is of similar age. I think it was done probably by the same person years and years and years ago. It's not a retrofit kitchen. I did send some pictures to support that. So although, truth is we didn't really speak to the sellers before we did this. They were not available really, but so they didn't indicate it was a 2-unit, but clearly it was from my way of thinking, and we hope to utilize it that way. So a little bit about me real fast. I grew up in Kalamazoo, moved to California about 35 years ago, raised a family, and about 2.5 years ago, we started acquiring some properties here in town. We had some prior to that, but we acquired probably 10 or 11, I guess, in the last 2.5 years. And we've spent a good amount of money. We're certainly not rich people, but I think we spent about $250,000 fixing these places up as best we could. And I decided about 10 months ago to come back here to get a little bit more involved in that. And so I am away from my family, but the purpose is to, improve these properties and do, frankly, a better job than happens if I'm not here. I'm a perfectionist. I like to do things nicely. It's kind of a curse in a certain way, but the end result is always nice. But it takes some time, the way I do it, I guess. Anyway, that house on 1705 Lake Boulevard, here's our plan. It has hardwood floors throughout. We've taken up linoleum and whatnot. Some of the hardwood floor was buckled from water damage, and we're replacing the damaged wood. We're gonna give it a light sanding. It's in good shape other than that. Gonna refinish it all. We've been vigorously sanding the wood, the painted woodwork in there, so that when we put the paint to it, it'll be all nice and attractive. Putting up a new wallboard, new vanities, new kitchen, a tile bathroom upstairs, tile shower, and I guess we don't know what we're going to do with the floor yet, but certainly an upgrade from what was there now. We want to make it very nice, to put it simply, and it will be nice. And I think it's laid out perfectly for two single units, 2 single bedroom places, kind of spacious ones at that. They have their own entrances. It's already set up for that. And I might add, I realize that this is not zoned for a 2-unit. It's kind of a side note, but I own a home just maybe 4 houses away on Lake Boulevard, and that is a duplex. And so kind of in my thought process when I purchased this, I didn't really think I guess I was naive to the whole notion that it couldn't be used as a duplex. So, with that in mind, with the fact that we're trying to do a good job be good stewards of the homes that we have here, and that we're spending a fair amount of money, and that I'm here away from my family, which has been too long at this point. But I will be, even when I go back, I will be coming back periodically when there are turnovers and things on properties and big jobs that have to be done. And it seems like with these old homes, there's always something that has to be done. But anyway, I've probably used up my time. With that in mind, I would, I guess, entertain any questions and that you might have. And thank you for this venue so we can talk.
So from the photos, it does look like it had been used as a 2-unit. Are the units separately metered?
No, they are not. They are not. So if we do the 2-unit, I wasn't sure I'd put a new separate electric meter or just pick up that cost myself. I'll definitely be putting in a new furnace. I was told that a meter, just to get a meter in from the streets, about $5,000, which is not that much, but might be worth it not to have the headache of paying for people's electric. But you know, but I don't know. I don't know the true cost on that, to be honest.
Does it currently have one furnace for the entire house?
It does. I had my furnace fell out there, and there'll be no problem. You know, tying into the ductwork and things, I guess.
And I can sort of tell by these pictures, but maybe you could describe it. It
Yes.
looks like there's an outside door that comes onto a downstairs landing, and then there's a door to the lower floor unit. You go up the stairs, and there's a door to the upper unit. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah. Exactly. And and those and the doors that are in there right now, if you notice, they're locking doors. Just I think I mentioned it earlier, but that's what really made it obvious to me that it was being used. You know, whether it was you know, not in compliance, I guess, with the code, but obviously single family wouldn't lock their upstairs. You know, 2 locks at the top and bottom of the lock door at the bottom of the stairs, and one at the top of the stairs as well. So, but
Are there other questions?
Mr. Eldridge, are there other duplexes in this residential zoned area?
Yes, there are other duplexes on that same street on Lay Boulevard. I looked specifically at that particular block between Cameron and Fulford, where this house is located in the 1700 block. And there are 4 duplexes in that block.
With variances or grandfathered situations?
I did not look each one of those up. I went through our rental records, so I found 8 1-unit rentals and then 4 duplexes. So I would say I'd have to look at that. I don't recall between 2003 and now any other variances in this part of Lay Boulevard. So, you know, I think a lot of them are probably just non-conforming and have been actively rented for many years. But like I said, I did not investigate each one.
Was it in 2003 that they changed the zoning requirements to only being single family?
No, that goes back much further. I mean, there was a point in time in the 1950s and before that where you had single family and duplexes being built in these neighborhoods. So,
So when did the zoning requirement change to only single family, not multifamily?
I would say that occurred sometime in the 60s, where it became, I mean, as the code evolved, it became more specific and more limiting on the uses allowed in certain zone districts.
So some of these units have been grandfathered in for 80 years.
Some of them, yes, correct. Because there used to be just residential zone districts or a residential zone district, a commercial zone district, and then industrial or manufacturing. And now it's broken down into very fine details of single family, multifamily, medium density, multifamily, high density. So, yeah, so it used to be a much more simplistic zoning model that was applied to the city with a lesser regulatory structure. So yeah, many of these came into existence legally. Others, if they were converted and caught in the process of being converted, would have had to get zoning board of appeals approval. So there have been some that do have variances as well, but I don't know about the ones particularly on this block.
Gotcha. Okay. And then as far as, do we have any idea how long that property has been vacant?
Yes. The notes that I found, in fact, I found a letter from the prior owner indicating in July of 2006 that they wanted it taken off the rental registration records because they didn't have the funds to make the repairs to the house so that it could pass the rental inspection. So that's, so then it was removed from our rental registration records, and that's where, where we show that, occupancy ceased shortly after that.
Occupancy ceased after 2006, and was it a duplex prior to that?
Yes, we have rental records that go back to the early 90s, where it was recertified over and over again as a 2-unit.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you. And then, Ed, when you saw when you purchased this property, you had every intention of being able to use it as a 2-unit?
Precisely. Yes.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah, that was absolutely, that was paramount, really. And that's kind of what I seek for purchases typically. I think there's a tremendous demand, aside from the, laws and whatnot. Seems like there's a real demand for, single unit places. People, the dynamic of the big family has changed, it's just, I find that we don't have those families with 5 or 6 kids anymore, and so I really, and this home does have ample parking too, although that would be just a single bedroom up and a single down. So you probably only have 2 cars there anyway, but there's probably room for 4. There's a very big garage back there. I don't think there'd be no on-street parking, no need for that. And, but I think it'd be very, very well suited for a 2-unit home. I think very nice, 2 really nice units, in fact. Yeah.
And so, at this point, given the current structure and layout of the property, do you think it's feasible or reasonably to turn it back into make it a fully functional 1-unit or a full house, single family house?
Well, anything can be done. That, it would require that the kitchen, which is kind of cute, just the way it is. I wasn't going to really change much there, but yeah, I like the old cabinetry if it's in good shape, you put new top on it maybe, but you'd have to rip out the kitchen, and but the layout is, but that
change the stairs. You can't go up the porch. Go upstairs.
That's right. So it would be, yeah, and you'd have an odd thing there at the entryway too. You kind of come into that little foyer, and then you split off, into separate directions. So it would be awkward. I don't think you could fix that, really. It would just be odd. Let's put it that way.
Appreciate it. And staff, do we know if this house was built originally to be a duplex, or was it ever built to be a single family residence?
The assessor records indicate single family. So I don't know when it actually changed over.
Gotcha. All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Are there additional staff comments?
I think a lot of the matters were covered. Obviously, Mr. Edlin talked about the fact there's a garage on the property. There is has a dedicated driveway. So it's got sufficient off-street parking for 2 dwelling units. As far as we talked about the other rentals on the same block, lot size wise, it is still a rather small lot. It's 44 feet wide and 110 feet deep. There is 4 other duplexes on that block. It is essentially 2 properties away from a transition to the commercial neighborhood zone. So when you look at your map, in fact, the line isn't clearly defined on the our vicinity map showing the circle around the property. That's the 300-foot vicinity circle. But once you get 2 properties from Fulford Street, so 2 properties to the east, it changes to the CN1 zone district. And then the other side of Fulford Street is M2 manufacturing. So, it is a property near the outer edge of the neighborhood, near a transition to a commercial zone. The 2 homes that are on the end of the block on the north and south sides of Lay Boulevard, adjacent to Fulford Street, are both duplexes. So there are other duplexes in close proximity to this one. So yeah, that's really all I have to add. I wish I had more records on, how and when it ended up turning into a duplex. But given the age of the cabinetry and the layout of the home and the older doors that are in there, it's been this way for quite some time. And our rental records, show a clear path of registering it and inspecting it as a duplex for well over a decade, and probably much longer than that if I look back into the 80s. So that's really all I have to share as far as comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we open it up to listen to the public comments?
We have no public comments at this time.
Okay. Who's got the finding of fact on this one? Oh, Dick, I think you're on mute still.
Okay, there we go. Now can you hear me?
Yep.
Can you hear me now, Matt?
Yes.
Okay. I move that the finding of fact for 1705 Lay Boulevard shall include all information included in the notice of public hearing dated July 28, 2020. There were 77 notices of the public hearing were sent and 0 responses were received and are part of the record. A public hearing was held before the board and public comments were accepted. In addition to the information and documents contained in the agenda packets, staff provided for the request. The Zoning Board of Appeals received additional comments on the request, including the numerous photos included in the document and comment from Daniel T. Edlin of West 520 Walnut Street. The finding of the fact shall include those documents just described and also the facts made during the public hearing, which are summarized as follows. Daniel T. Edlin of 520 Walnut Street proposes 1705 label to be used as a duplex rather than a single family home in a single family district. 80 days ago, he approximately purchased the property and actually recently moved to the Kalamazoo area where he originally was born and raised to on the duplex using firsthand knowledge and ability to work with the development of that project. It's restored and it's being the hand hardwood floors, doing painting, staining, new bed tile, and an upstairs bath. The two units proposes each have their own lockable entrances, entered through a separate entryway doorway, and there are other duplexes, numerous duplexes on the street. Prior to 2006, when the property became vacant, it was, and for a number of years have been used as a duplex. So that's history, and that's proposed. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor of approval of the finding of fact signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
And opposed, same sign. Right, finding of fact passed. Ms. Doan, will you read the motion into the record?
I make a motion to approve a use variance from Chapter 4, Section 4.1 to utilize the property at 1705 Lay Boulevard as a duplex due to the floor plan and prior use of the structure as a duplex years ago.
Is there a second?
I second.
I'll second that motion.
All right, we got seconds. Discussion.
I'm going to be voting in favor of it for many reasons. Number one, it's been vacant since 2006. Prior to that, it was set up as a duplex. Every structural modification to make it a duplex was there, and since 2006, none of those modifications have changed at all. It seems like it would take extensive work to turn it back into a single family. It's reasonably fiscally probably not feasible to even make this a cash flowing property if you were to do something like that. And then there's a great need in the area for houses. There's no, I think last meeting I was in, had probably 1,000 units represented between landlords, and they didn't have one vacancy. So there's a need, and this makes sense. Other properties have been grandfathered in, so I'm going to be in favor.
I concur. I'll be in favor as well. In addition, I think it'll have very minimal impact, if any, on the surrounding neighbors with parking, extra cars, things like that. So I will be in favor as well.
And that will also follow along with those two previous comments. I mean, that's my feeling exactly. Historically, before the property became vacant, it had been for a number of years as a duplex, and for the same reasons, I will be supporting the motion as well.
Pete, can we do a roll call vote?
Yes, this is a roll call vote to approve the motion. We'll start with Mr. Skalsky,
Yes.
Carroll,
yes,
Lager,
Yes.
Doan,
Yes.
Flaw.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Edlund, the motion carries and your variance is granted.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all very much. I really do appreciate it. And we'll make that a beautiful place. And then we'll keep going. Thank you very, very much to all of you.
Good luck on your project.
Thank you. Have a great evening.
All right. Ms. Doan, will you read the next case into the record?
Certainly. An application for a variance for provisions of the zoning ordinance has been filed with the Zoning Board of Appeals by Nixon Kenyal, owner of 810 Ray Avenue, which is situated in Zone RMU, Sub-Area 5, Residential Mixed Use District. The applicant is requesting a use variance from Chapter 3, Section 3.7-1 to utilize the property for used car sales, which is not in alignment with Subarea 5 of the Riverfront overlay for the RMU district. This sub-area does not permit any automotive-related businesses or vehicle sales. Subarea 5 is intended for parks and open space due to significant flooding along this portion of the river. Please note this request will not change the zoning classification of the property. This is a request for variance only regarding the item described above.
Thank you. Mr. Kenyal, I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your name, but if you could pronounce your name for us and please present your case.
It's Kenyal.
Kenyal, thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
So please tell us what you plan on, what you would like to do with the property.
Okay, so I would like to use the property for selling used cars dealership. When I bought the property, I saw it and I bought it based on where it is. It has 4 garage doors and it has a parking space in the front, which is asphalt, and it has a big space in the back that is more than 4,500 square feet. And the building itself, it has 4 bays with big garage doors equipped with hoists that can be used to work on cars, and it can also be used to store the cars. The area is close to 2 auto parts stores. It is close to Advance, it is close to AutoZone. So if the car has to be fixed, the parts are closer. It is close to Monroe and it's close to Mufflerman. So when I saw the building and the guy was selling, I bought it with the intention to use for selling cars because it has all the facilitations that could help on working on cars, on selling, on parking based on space. And it was my first time to buy a building, so I didn't know how to check the limitations with the zoning and whatever. So I went direct and bought so I could be able to invest. And based on the flood, it has been mentioned the area floods. So when I asked the owner, he used to use the sandbags to stop the flood from coming inside. And I came an idea. I don't know, is there a way I can share screen so I can show what I'm thinking?
Pete, is it possible for Mr. Kenyal to share a screen?
Yeah, let me, Neil, are you there? Do you need to turn anything on to allow Nixon to do the screen share?
Yeah, he should be all set now.
Okay, thank you.
How do I do?
Do you see the button at the bottom? So you want to have your image open on the screen behind, and then you just click the green share screen that's down at the bottom of your viewing window right now.
Can you see?
Yep. It should be loading right now. There it is. Yep, we can see it.
Okay. Yep.
Okay, so this structure, can you see my mouse, please?
Yes.
Okay, so this structure, I'm thinking in the front of, at the boundary with the road and the structure of the building to make something like a door that's like 1.5 feet or 2 feet with the support structures like this one. And then on the middle, I would put the rubber structure or the plastic that would rub on both of the sides. So it would fix on the ground and on the other side on the ground. And around with the boundary with the neighbors on the boundary of the property, I would just build a small concrete wall like for 2 feet or 1.5 feet based on historical levels of the flood. So when the water floods, it cannot come from the outside of the boundaries alongside, and in the front, this one would be able to block. When the flood goes away, I would remove this support and put it flat. That is the structure I'm thinking to build around so it can stop the flooding. And on the parking wise, in the front of the building, there's a space where I can park 8 cars, and I would put a mark for disabled, 2 spaces. And I would put the parking space for the customers in the back. I illustrated on the previous application. And inside the building, there's spaces for 2 parking, for 2 offices, where one office will be used for car sales and paperwork and keep the documents inside. And on the hoist, the spaces for the 4 bays, one would be used to fix the cars, and the other 3, one can accommodate 2 cars if parked in parallel, one next to each other. So inside it can be used to store 6 cars if parked next to each other. So the inside also can have the cars that can be showed to the customers outside, and in the rear, I can take one of the part, I can modify it to be used for the parking.
Mr. Kenyal, Nixon?
Yes.
Can you switch the image to the that site layout you're referring to?
Yes.
I know the board members have it in their packet, but if we can show it, and then everybody watching the YouTube channel can see it as well.
Okay. Can you see?
Yes.
This one. So this is the building. This is a bay with a hoist. So along this space, it is enough to fit 2 cars, one here, one here. This is another bay. This can be used to repair cars. This space has a space of 2 doors. One is used, one is not used, but the inside of the building is all open. So is open space that is enough to keep a car. And then this is a bay that can be used to keep 2 cars in parallel, one next to each other, one next to each other. And then this one is office. This one is office. This is a bathroom. So the bathroom has a water and everything. This one has a furniture. Here there's furniture, here there's furniture too. So there are 2 entrances to the building. You can enter through this door and you can enter through this door. So this space, the cars can be parked 1, 2, 3, 4. Or to keep more space here for the public, we can keep 3 cars this way, and this way, this way, and this way. This place can be open, or single car can be parked here. A single car can be parked here. I was planning to put disabled parking at the front here with the space. And in the rear side, it has more than 4,500 square feet. It is more than 95 from here to here. And it's more than 42 feet from here to here. So either if the cars can be parked here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And at the rear here, I can either modify with 1 line or I can park alongside this way. And if green side is needed, I can just put 1 line or 2 line and leave the rest of the place with the green place.
Is the rear lot paved currently?
Would you ask again, please?
Is the rear lot concrete or paved?
The rear lot is not concrete, but the front side from this boundary, this is where the building ends. So from here to the front side is paved. So from this place to this place is paved. This place is paved. This is not paved. Along this line is the end.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any questions?
Do you possess
quick.
all, excuse me, do you possess all the proper licenses and approvals to sell automobiles?
I have to be approved by the zone in order to apply for the license.
Thank you.
So you have to purchase the building and then you can apply for the license?
I have already purchased the building.
Okay. So, and your plan was to deal with the water was around that entire perimeter was to build a 2-foot cement wall?
Yes,
So, and then on the front of the wall, you'd have some sort of contraption that would allow you, forgive me,
yes,
that would allow you to move in and out, provided on the water level.
yes. So
Okay.
in the front side, let me open.
And in
This
your,
truck,
did the previous owner protect his property with the sandbags then? When
Yes.
when the water improved? Okay.
yes.
That's all.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Kenyal, can you hit stop for share screen? It should be up at the top.
Here. This one?
There you go.
That's
Perfect.
it.
Thank you.
All right,
Thank you.
staff comments. Oh, I'm sorry, Pete, you're on mute.
Muted, I'm sorry. Done that twice already tonight. Thank you for the reminder. So first of all, the front property line does run at an angle, so the parking lot is a little smaller. The diagram kind of shows the front property line in the front of the building running almost parallel to one another. But when you look at the aerial view, you can see the angle of the front property line compared with the front of the building. So there is a little less parking surface out in front of the building than shown on the layout. But the bigger issue here is the zoning. And this property has sat idle for a number of years because of the zoning, because it sits in the residential mixed-use zone district, and it is classified under sub-area 5. This is something that was put in place in 2009 when we rezoned the whole riverfront area, and there were certain areas very close to the riverbank that would get substantially flooded every time the river would rise. And this stretch of Ray Avenue is one of those areas. I did not include an aerial photo, but the entire street floods. So not only do the properties on the river side, but also the properties on the opposite side of Ray Avenue. And this property in particular, even when I was out there, there's still evidence of sandbags that were put around the building for the last flood to try to keep the water out. So it was intentionally classified in this sub-area 5, which we have a separate table of uses allowed. We have a separate description in the zoning ordinance for sub-area 5, which I'd like to read briefly. It says the intent of sub-area 5 is to be used for park areas and open space along the Kalamazoo River. Existing homes may remain and shall be deemed to be conforming land uses, but new principal and accessory structures shall be required to comply with all applicable design standards. Basically, meaning if you wanted to put an addition on an existing residence there or add a garage, it would have to be elevated accordingly to, to get the floor level out of the floodplain, because all these properties are within the 100-year floodplain. The floodplain almost extends over to Gull Road. The Subarea 5 further states, if an existing industrial or commercial use terminates, is abandoned, or relocates out of Subarea 5, no industrial or commercial use shall occupy any part of such property. So this is very specific language that was built into the ordinance to preclude commercial and industrial uses from moving back into this area when and if buildings vacated. And so that has already happened to the building across the street that's on the opposite side of Ray Avenue. There's a building that has an old loading dock, and that hasn't been used in years. As far as background on the building itself, it was constructed in 1966. It was built for a garage for auto service and fleet maintenance or fleet repair. So yes, it is, it is a auto service garage. This project, if it were to get a use variance approved tonight, would then go through site plan review. So a lot of the details that we talked about tonight, that Mr. Kenyal laid out, that would have to be looked at more closely by the site plan review committee to see if, where the green space needs to be added, where there is actually enough room to have parking spaces identified for the display of vehicles in front of the building, the use of the building, any upgrades to the building that are needed. So all that would be looked at during the site plan review. But the ordinance is very specific as far as these buildings in this area. And that is why there are less than a handful of residential structures still occupied. And, these commercial buildings have been sitting idle for a number of years. So with that, I'll answer any questions that board members have.
Have there been any variances granted in Subarea 5?
No. There was a request for a gas station on Riverview Drive, a short distance to the north, and that was denied. So none have been granted.
Thank you.
So what's the city's plan with these commercial buildings, given the fact that they are right now sitting there? I see the houses, I can see this particular property was up for sale for several years in a row. The last time, probably before this owner bought it, it expired, which means that it was on the market until the contract ran out. That was on the market for 6 months with no bites. So I'm curious, does the city have any plan for these, or do they just want some guy to buy it and then just have a storage shed for personal storage shed? What's their idea?
Well, knowing that there was specific language tied to commercial and industrial uses here, it would have been in the owner's interest to keep the use active in the building, so that it didn't fall into a state of abandonment. Unfortunately it has, and now it falls under those clauses in the ordinance. So as far as what the city has planned, well, the city, the ordinance is geared to revert these properties to open space over time. There are less residences on this block now. Some have been demolished over the years, and there right now are no active businesses that are legal on this block. So like I said, there's this one, that already has some vehicles parked in front of it now. But, again, there's just this old service building, and then there's another commercial building across the street, which is vacant.
Thank you. Are there public comments, or were there any calls on this?
I'm just checking that right now. No comments were received. So we do not have any public comments to share at this time.
How long has this building been derelict, or 9 years?
It's hard to say. I would say roughly 8 years, looking at the enforcement history. There was a case within the last 5 years where the zoning inspector sent notice to the property owner for accumulation of junk automobiles on the property, and then those were removed and the case was closed. But there wasn't anything, there wasn't any active business going on there. It was just being used for storage.
Have taxes been collected on this property over the years then? I mean, from the way the ordinance reads, unless you dedicated parkland, you have no value to it in the city yet. Is there a assessment based on property taxes that are going against those lands?
Well, it is still, they still pay property taxes. Now there is the assessor review board. So the owner, has the ability any year, to sign up for a slot to come in and discuss their tax bill.
Right.
I do not know if that has happened, but there isn't any relief that's been given for taxation of these buildings. But obviously, the argument could be made for obsolescence here, definitely.
Yep. Thank you.
I suppose with the building the way that it is there any what is the conforming use for that building? Like, is it just to store things for personal reasons, or obviously you probably couldn't live there.
Parks and open space.
You could have a park. All right. Giant building with a park for everybody.
Well, there is some special uses, but there are things like library, museum, cultural exhibit, that sort of thing. Kalamazoo Department of Public Safety Substation is also listed under permitted uses, as well as parks. So it's very limited.
This ordinance came around specifically because of the flooding.
Yes.
Yes. Let me clarify that. This ordinance came about, A, because of environmental concerns, and B, because of the change in thinking about development along the river and nearby. So this is a huge area that was rezoned into commercial mixed use and residential mixed use, and then those mixed use zone districts allowed for residential and commercial uses was then further defined by 9 sub areas. And so that, so we have a separate use table for each sub area as far as what uses are permitted. And, so it was promoting redevelopment as well as addressing environmental concerns was really the impetus for the whole riverfront overlay.
Gotcha. I was just curious on what conforming use the applicant actually had currently for the building. Doesn't sound like much.
Okay. Are there any further questions, or shall we close public? Oh, go ahead.
It was you said 09 was when the rules changed regarding the area.
Yes. Yeah. When the riverfront overlay was created.
Thank you.
So when the city overlays this riverfront designation, do they work with any organizations like the Southwest Michigan Land Conservatory or Conservancy to proactively help property owners who find themselves with unusable land to find a use?
Well, when this came about, there were many public hearings with residents. I don't know exactly all of what transpired back then, but the way the ordinance is structured, the uses that were there could continue to operate. So there was the part built in about the residential uses, because, the city wasn't, didn't want to get into a situation where, they were, causing the homes to be removed prematurely. However, the commercial and manufacturing uses were more on the environmental concern side. And so the language was clearly written much stronger. So the active uses at the time could continue. But once they ceased, that was it. So
these environmental concerns are for the water or for the resident being affected by water?
But these are for the type of contaminants that wash into the river. So when we have the flooding and an auto repair building actually takes on water, and then that water slowly recedes back into the river, washing all kinds of stuff, out of the auto repair building. So that's part of it. The other part of it is all the cars on the property that would be sitting, in standing water during the flood period. And I know Mr. Kenyal, had to put up his display of a potential, break wall for the water. But the problem is when we have these floods, they don't just roll up over the riverbank and across the road and then turn around and recede, within a short period of time. Sometimes it's a couple days, or maybe it's almost a week before we really start to see the waters recede. So you have standing water inside buildings, you have cars sitting in the water that may be leaking fluids. So, it's less than an ideal circumstance. So that's the reason that, this is, not a use listed as permitted to have any sort of auto repair or motor vehicle sales in this sub area.
Thank you. With that, let's close the public hearing, and can I have a motion on the finding of fact?
Yes. I move that the finding of fact for 810 Ray Avenue shall include all information included in the notice of public hearing dated July 28th, 2020. 29 notices of public hearing were sent and 0 responses were received. A public hearing was held before the board and public comments were accepted. In addition to the information and documents contained in agenda packets staff provided for this request, the Zoning Board of Appeals reviewed additional documents via shared screen with the applicant. The finding of fact shall include those documents just described, and also the facts and comments made during the public hearing, which are summarized as follows. Nick Kenyal spoke on behalf of the variance request. The property is well suited for car sales due to ample front and rear parking and a 4-bay garage. There are 2 nearby auto part stores to complement his proposed car sales endeavor. The applicant did present flood water mitigation plans. Detailed zoning language attempts to prevent continued development or modification of existing structures. Now that the use of the property has ceased by approximately 8 years, the city's intention is for the property to become open or green space in order to address environmental concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
Right. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
And opposed, same sign. All right, motion on finding of fact carries. Could I have a motion for approval of the variance?
I make a motion to approve a use variance from Chapter 3, Section 3.7-1 to utilize the property of 810 Ray Avenue for used car sales, which is not in alignment with Subarea 5 of the Riverfront overlay for the RMU district. The subarea does not permit any automotive businesses or vehicle sales. Subarea 5 is intended for parks and open spaces due to significant flooding along this portion of the river.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, discussion.
This one frustrates me. I'd like to say yes, but I don't think the situation allows us to vote yes. Frustrates me that the process to purchase property that we've noticed in both of these two cases tonight means that a considerable amount of due diligence needs to be done during the escrow or contracting period. The average citizen, including myself, finds that process difficult and confusing. And it saddens me that somebody owns a property and they can't do something with it. And that there's no prospect for proactive green space development. So I can't vote yes, but I wish I could.
I will
The same
be,
boat as Carol. Basically, we have, based on, because of the city's ordinance, we have an unsellable property, a structure that would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to duplicate. And there may be some workarounds from that, but we made an ordinance that made it impossible. Right now, this property, and for every, since the only viable source is to make a museum out of it or a green space, we have an unsellable property. And I don't see, I don't see any justification that I can make reasonably and in any authenticity or integrity to say yes, even though I desperately want to.
thank you. Could we have a roll call vote?
Okay, we'll start with Mr. Carroll,
No.
Mr. Skalsky,
No.
Doan,
No.
Pla,
No.
Lager.
No. The variance did not pass.
So
Okay.
Mr. Kenyal, I'll be in touch with you and we can have a meeting and talk about other alternatives.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
Mr. Eldridge, I do appreciate you trying whatever you can to help them out. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
All right. Moving on to the third case of the night. Could we have a, Madam Secretary, could you read that into the record, please?
Of course. An application for a variance for provisions of the zoning ordinance has been filed with the Zoning Board of Appeals by the Southwest Michigan Land Conservancy, owner of the Bow in the Clouds Preserve at 3401 Nazareth Road, which is located in Zone RS5 Residential Single Dwelling District, or Signal Dwelling District. The applicant is requesting a variance from the National Features Protection Ordinance, Chapter 50, Section 50-6.2H, to authorize development of trails in the preserve which will encroach into the protected slopes which have a grade greater than 20%. Please note this request will not change the zoning classification of the property. This is a request for variances only regarding the item described above.
Thank you. Who's the applicant tonight? Mr. Letow. You pronounce it for us.
That'll work. Leto is fine.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll be as succinct as I can. I appreciate everyone's time. I know it's late. My name is Mitch Leto. I'm the Stewardship Director at the Southwest Michigan Land Conservancy. We're a nonprofit and we do conservation work in 9 counties in Southwest Michigan, including Kalamazoo County, which we're all in now. And also kind of co-presenting and represented here, Ken Paragon is from OCBA, landscape architect firm that we're working with on the project. And we've also been working with Jamie McCarthy at the city. So I'll just kind of go through the project a little bit and talk about why we're requesting a variance and specifically relating to the NFP ordinance, the features that are present on site and specifically the slope. So, so this property was a donation of land to the Southwest Michigan Land Conservancy from the Congregation of St. Joseph, which are responsible for having initiated Nazareth College and Borges Hospital some years ago, and felt they could no longer take care of it. And it was donated to the Land Conservancy with the hope and intent that we would make it accessible to the public and take care of the natural features, natural areas of the property. Property itself is about 57 acres. It contains streams, wetlands, forests, and has frontage on Nazareth Road, as close to Gull Road M43 as well. And it is currently open to the public. There's parking, there's access. It's free to the public. So all of our preserves are free, open 9 to 5, 365 days of the year. And one of our major goals, especially with this property being located mostly within the city limits of Kalamazoo, has been to create as much access as we can for as many members of the community as we can, and has a lot of potential implications there, some of those being physical accessibility. And so the project that we're presenting is related to the creation of the trails and that physical accessibility for those that are physically impaired, visually impaired, those sorts of things. And so that's been a major goal of ours. And some years ago, around 2011, there was a series of vandalism incidents on the property in which the manhole covers from the city sewer that was installed on the property in the 50s and 60s. There was a blockage there, and there was an overflow of untreated sewage into the wetlands and nearby waterways. And it was really a wake-up call for our organization and for the city itself that we needed to come up with a solution for maintenance of these sewer lines and manhole covers. So that's what I'll be kind of presenting here tonight. So we've met with the sewer division probably 6 or 7 times at this point, and made sure that our goals for accessibility for trails, barrier-free type access are consistent with their goals of being able to get vehicles for maintenance into this property as well, without, harming any more than we have to the natural features of the property, but working with them to make sure they can get to the places they need to be. And I'll bring up the PDF here and attempt to share my screen. Okay, can everyone see that?
Yes.
Okay, so this is kind of the backed out view here. This is Nazareth Road to the east, and to the south, there's the Congregation of St. Joseph property. So So we're kind of focusing in the northeast corner. And this dotted line here, can you see my mouse as well?
Yes.
Okay. This dotted line here signifies the transition between the township and the city boundaries. Our parking lot, which is currently here, this trail system, which is currently here, is a sort of phase 1 accessible trail. Everything is under 5% in terms of slope. That was completed in 2019. And then here to the north and the west, where you see the topographic lines shown here, is the proposed trail system that would both allow accessibility as well as allow the city to be able to access manholes. The city has an access easement, so they do have the right to build a road or access the property as it stands now, but we both agreed that coming up with a cooperative solution was a much better path forward. And so I'll unpack the visual a little bit here. So there are about 5 different natural features in the natural features protection layer that are present on site. And an applicant has to be sensitive to those features and meet the NFP standards. So this pink line here is a buffer along Spring Valley Creek. And you can see this is the intended trail system. So there's a larger trail where the city, it's called a vac truck, vacuum truck would be able to access from an upper area, and a lower trail that goes closer to the stream that a smaller unit called an easement machine would be able to connect to the vac truck and reach these manhole covers. So the black dots are the manhole covers. So those are very much fixed locations where the trail essentially has to go proximal for the city to be able to maintain them. So the pink line is the stream buffer, and you can see the trail is outside of that. There's a wetland buffer as well. That's these sort of blue tealish lines here. This is the buffer that's set out in the NFP. And you can see that the trail is just outside of that. There's also woodland present on site. You can see there's been a tree survey of the property, and you can see the trees that come up. The NFP ordinance allows an applicant to remove a certain amount of the woodland for development depending on the size. And we're talking in the number of, probably 12 to 20 individual trees where the path has to go. So it was able to meet that standard, as well as the wetland and surface water standards. The standard where we're really unable to meet on the site, because you can see the topographic lines here, very close together, indicating steep slopes there, are greater than 20% as laid out in the NFP standards. So this blue line here shows where that slope does exceed 20%. And I'm not sure how well you can see, but around there's this sort of peach colored buffer where the toe in the foot of the slope where earth moving or development is intended to stay out of for NFP. And you can see to get to these manholes down here at some point, the trail has to go down the slope. And so that is the specific natural features protection ordinance that we're not able to meet. And yeah, I think that pretty well covers it too. Jamie is, I also sit on the NFP board. Obviously a conflict of interest. I didn't vote in the last meeting, but I think it's a good idea and I understand the intention, but with the sort of city direction of where the manhole covers are located and with the natural topography of the site, we're really unable to undertake this project in our mind without impacting that slope.
If I might just add one comment, that one of the things that drives the trail layout is the slope on the proposed trail. Because as Mitch mentioned, we want to make this, the goal is to make this an accessible trail system, accessible to all with physical handicaps, physical and visual and et cetera. That really requires the slope on the trail to be relatively flat. can't be more than 5%, 1 on 20. That means that really sort of guides in many ways the way we can lay out the trail to get from the high ground where the existing trail is to the creek near manhole 4, which means we can't just avoid all the slopes.
Does that mean you'll be moving earth to get your 120 ratio?
Yes.
And are you doing this primarily for the city so they can get to these manholes? Or are you doing it primarily for access for all people? And I'm not asking both, I'm asking which is primary.
Well, the trail layout is primary, the grading is primarily for the access of all folks. The sort of location of the trail to a certain extent is driven by city access to the manholes. So it's a combination of trying to lay it out, grade it so it's sloped appropriately for the physically challenged, and still get the public service equipment to the manholes.
And so the mission of the conservancy is access, not necessarily conservancy of topography.
I'd say that's correct. I mean, our preserves, we try to strike a balance of allowing public access to connect with natural areas, but being sensitive to the features that we're also trying to protect. But topography in and of itself isn't necessarily a value.
I think it's important to keep in mind that this preserve, because of its location, is essentially a natural park for city and township residents to use. The Conservancy also owns a number of preserves that are not open to the public, either because they aren't accessible, they're too sensitive, etc. But this one becomes a natural park in essence.
And I think in terms of the surrounding adjacent parcels as well, it's quite probably 500-600 feet from the road itself. And if anything, it becomes an asset to the neighbors. Many of the neighbors are volunteers, and we hear from them a lot in terms of how they're using the preserve. And we've seen studies of property values that go up when permanently protected areas, parks and that sort of thing occur near residential areas. And so in terms of affecting adjacent landowners, I think if anything, it would be a positive.
Thank you. Are there any further questions before we ask for staff comments?
Would you like me to continue sharing the screen or stop that?
I guess for whoever's doing the staff comments, would you prefer the screen be up for us or not?
Why don't we
But
Pete?
yeah, Jamie, I was gonna say, do you want to make a few comments before we get to my part? Speaking of staff and staff.
Yeah. Let me make a few comments, and it might be helpful to have the map up here. So in your packet, you had a recommendation that was actually coming from the NFP review board. It was the vice chair who had chaired this meeting, since Mitch was very much wearing his Land Conservancy daytime job hat. And overall, the board really looked closely at this one. Certainly, probably some of much of what we might consider variances or relief are actually portions that are in Kalamazoo Township, and the our city ordinances don't apply there. So I will point that out, that we're looking at everything south of that dotted line that Mitch pointed out. So they looked at that very closely, and they took into account several factors. So certainly the intent, if the intent of the natural features protection overlay and the standards is to protect our natural features, including water quality, they felt it was very important to make sure we have good access for cleaning out sanitary sewer. So that was really important to them. They felt like there was a very minimal tree removal. And overall, the grading plan looks like it won't be very severe here. There aren't any new structures being built, and they're not really changing the impervious surfaces. All of the trailways are going to be kind of a crushed gravel. And then some of, if you look, these are relatively new rules. They've been around just over a year. And so many of the natural feature standards allow for impervious, non-motorized kind of trailways. But that's not the case in slope. I will point that out. But, thinking that part of the intent of NFP was to enable public to have access to and enjoy natural features, they felt like, there was value in allowing that to happen. It was just kind of, in what way will that happen? So overall, they did vote unanimously to recommend that the variance be granted for these sections within the city of Kalamazoo portion of the project. And so you can see kind of where that trail goes to the south. There's sort of very limited spots where it touches the blue. And so they looked at those closely and said, yes, we would recommend that a variance be granted. Having looked at that and realizing that if you're to get back to some of these manholes and then get people back to the wetland area for viewing and nature and wildlife enjoyment, there weren't other trailway options to avoid any of the regrading. And it looks like the plan here is the minimal regrading that's necessary. Let me see here in the report. So yeah, they found that the applicant appeared to be requesting the minimum relief required, and that it would not be causing any substantial detriment to the slopes themselves. There wasn't like an extensive amount of land balancing or cut and fill that was happening. These are going to be gradual grading, and then there's a plan for, and the applicant will be required to then plant and do some slope stabilization afterward. Then they also felt like there were a lot of, there's a lot of conservation of natural features here. There's going to be a lot of consideration. For instance, the Land Conservancy is working with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to protect our habitat of certain species out here. They're certainly, that's their mission and that's what they're driven by. And so the board felt like that very much balanced this application, that the benefits here and the work that would be done and the way that the Land Conservancy showed that they could handle this kind of helped balance any negative that could happen from changing some of the slopes of the topography out there.
What percentage of the trail system, 10, 12, 15%, is this variance area?
Oh, I would say much smaller than that, right? Mitch, can you scroll down? Sorry. So I definitely see, so as you take the fork, right, to the south, you hit into some of the slope there. And then as you come around, the rest of that blue is not a 20% slope, correct?
This is the buffer from the wetlands.
Wetland,
and
yeah.
So within the city portion, so the dividing line is here, so everything's south. It's really just this section. You can see it continues along over here, and essentially can have the appropriate buffer. There's probably some cut fill over here too. So I think the trail system in total, this section is 1/2 to 3/4 of a mile. And so, I suspect that the total area might be 100 feet, 150 feet maybe.
I know.
My apologies. I thought you were
I'll
pointing
get 'em.
somewhere else, that there was a problem northeast on this map. So thank you for showing us this area.
Sure.
Right here, north of the parking lot where there's a loop, I thought you were describing. My apologies.
No problem.
because what I was going to ask is 2 questions. One, are wheelchairs going to navigate crushed gravel?
That's the intent. Yes,
It's going to be super used.
I hope so.
That's the intent. Yep.
Sometimes I'm too sarcastic. So there's no way to leave the features and reduce. So my question was, and I'm sorry because I thought it was a different area. I thought we were doing the grading in the area where a vac truck could do a 20, I don't know if it's 20% a truck can do that, but I thought we were doing this in areas where a truck could go with the natural landscape, but full accessibility could not be obtained. So
maybe might help clarify. So this first section here, this is meant for the large truck, and we worked with the city to actually see how little of this larger trail can we create, and we can still meet your needs in terms of maintenance. And then this smaller trail, which is probably more like a typical footpath, 5 feet wide or so, there's going to be a smaller unit that can connect with the large truck that will be up here on the higher, flatter ground. And that unit will be able to come down here to access these more distant holes. And with a smaller trail, we're able to also minimize the amount of grading and just the size of the trail, the overall impact. It's more consistent with a walking path.
And Mitch, so those 2 northern manholes aren't in the city, but the more southern one here is one that needs access. And also I recall you said, I think Public Services said they could send the easement machine down there, but would need to, it's a tracked vehicle. It's rather small. I mean, it's a much smaller than the large equipment, but it's nimble, but it needs to be able to get down there, which is not easy or without impact. And so, having a trail also, I think overall, we talked about how, less cause for erosion if we're sending, Public Services is sending vehicles down that way on an established trail with crushed gravel than probably sending something down there.
thank you.
Thank you. Are there, Mr. Aldridge, do you have staff comments as well?
Yes, and I'm sorry, you have something more, Jamie?
I was going to ask you, we can stop sharing, Mr. Eldridge, if you're good
Yeah,
with
you
that,
can
so that
stop
people
sharing.
can see. Thank you.
Yeah, and for those that haven't met Jamie McCarthy before, she's our liaison to the Natural Features Protection Board from my department, Community Planning and Economic Development. So she does a great job with the technical elements of the Natural Features Protection Ordinance and is now working on an update to that ordinance and reviewing to make sure we've got all the properties included in the Natural Features Protection overlay that we should. So that's underway right now, and there'll be more information coming out soon. So first thing I want to say is, yes, this preserve does span into Kalamazoo Township a significant distance. And so what we did as far as our 300-foot noticing vicinity, we thought it was only fair to make sure that we solicited feedback from all parties involved. So we had a 300-foot noticing vicinity that it stretched into Kalamazoo and touched on 10 properties. And then we included the northern parcel of this preserve, which is completely in the township, and then had another 29 notices that we sent out to Kalamazoo Township residents, to which we received no responses. So, we put the word out there, and I think everybody's just more excited about the trails going in, and did not send any written feedback in. So we'll check in a minute, see if we got any voicemail messages. But, on the environmental side, the city has turned the corner, and we have, not only do we have a natural features protection ordinance now, but we have made other ordinance amendments over the years to allow for gravel parking in certain circumstances. Unfortunately, that didn't happen until after the Bow in the Clouds Preserve was created and the first trails were put in. So the Southwest Michigan Land Conservancy was before the Zoning Board of Appeals back in 2014 for a variance to have a gravel parking lot and not be required to surface the whole parking lot with concrete or asphalt, because that went directly against what they were trying to do by limiting their environmental footprint. And obviously future maintenance costs too. So, but we have now changed that, and we have an allowance for graveled parking for certain circumstances. On the joint cooperation side, it sounds like it was a fairly long road with the numerous meetings with our public services wastewater division to come up with a plan to identify trail locations that would also accommodate the Vector truck and the smaller piece of equipment to get to the manholes. So obviously the trail system could have been structured differently, but the Southwest Michigan Land Conservancy was working very closely with our city department to make sure that this was could be really a joint use setup. So I applaud them for their cooperation and making our wastewater division their field work a little bit easier going forward. And other than that, as Ms. McCarthy mentioned, the NFP board has met. They have approved a recommendation for this variance, and that's all I have for staff comments at this time.
Thank you. Are there any public comments on voicemail?
No public comments at this time.
All right, good. Anything further?
I guess I would add that we did have one individual at the public hearing last month with the NFP board, and it was one individual who lives at and is part of the congregation of St. Joe, Sisters of St. Joe, and she spoke in favor of the project, and that was all of the public comment we received.
Thanks. Could we have the motion on finding of fact, please?
Give me a minute. I gotta organize all this. So much talking. So much finding of facts. So many facts.
We'll find them all.
I know. I move that the finding of fact for location 3401 Nazareth Road shall include all information included in the notice of public hearing dated July 28th, 2020. 39 notices of public hearing were sent, 0 responses were read or were received and are part of the record. A public hearing was held before the board and public comments were made. In addition to the information and documents contained in the agenda packet staff provided for the request, the Zoning Board of Appeals received additional documents on the request, including none to follow. The finding of fact shall include those documents just described, and also the facts and comments made during the public hearing, which are summarized. The applicant mentioned that the property was donated to the land land conservatory in the hopes that it would be more open to the public. And they have other conservatories that are open 365 days a year and are open to the public. The goal was to make the property more accessible, which is why they want to improve the property by making trails. This is a joint venture with the city of Kalamazoo to also allow appropriate vehicles to fix sewer lines. There are 5 natural features that an applicant needs to be aware of when for the NF, what was it?
P.
Was NFP? NFP. The trails are in compliance for all but one, which is the grading. In order to allow people to use the trails, there will have to be some change to the grading. The applicant noted this is a natural place for a park. Also noted that it will positively impact the neighborhood and potentially raise property values. Mr. Carroll made mention, wanted clarification on how the percentage or how much of the trail is non-conforming, and then also if wheelchairs will be able to navigate it. Jamie McCarthy, the board, the liaison between the I didn't write it down, what was it, FNB?
Yeah, I should have. It's Natural
FNB.
Features Protection, Natural Features Protection.
NFP.
Yes.
NFP, for the NFP, Natural Liaison. The board mentioned that the board looks favorably and felt that it was an improvement to have, and it was important to have access to the sewer. And they're working closer with other conservation groups in order to make sure that this will not have a negative impact on other wildlife. Trail itself has only 100 feet of non-conforming trails. Staff noted that the trail is not, or the conservatory is not only within the Kalamazoo city, but also in Kalamazoo Township. Sent notices to Kalamazoo Township. No responses were received, and noted the trails need to be made in a way where trucks can accommodate them to fix the sewer line. And that concludes the finding of fact.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. All in favor of approval of the finding of fact signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
And opposed, same sign. All right, finding of fact is set. We have a motion for approval of the variance.
Moment. I make a motion to approve the variance from Natural Features Protection Ordinance, Chapter 50, Section 50-6.2H, to authorize the development of trails in the preserve which will encroach into the protected slopes, which have a grade greater than 20%.
Thank you. Is there a second on the motion?
Second the motion.
I'll second the motion.
Everyone seconds it.
I'll second again.
I think Mr. Carroll was first. All right, discussion.
I'll be supporting. I stand corrected. I did a little Google research on the gravel accessibility. It does seem to be a thing. I had to get my brain around that. I think everybody's done a good job, and it seems like there was a lot of thought put into it. And my only plea is that you'll help people like the last applicant down on the river, and see if we can conserve some of that land and help out those people down there. So good job on this project.
All right, let's have a roll call vote.
We'll start with Mr. Flaw,
Yes.
Doan,
Yes.
Lager,
Yes.
Skalsky,
Yes.
Carroll,
Yes.
All right, the variance passes. Thank you.
Thanks everybody very much for your time, and hope you come visit the preserve sometime.
Yeah, we'll
Doors
do.
open.
Thank
Great
you.
looking
talking.
forward to
I'm
it.
looking forward to it. Thank you.
Do get out there. It's a great place.
Well, the price
Thank
is right.
What's that?
Price is right. Sounds good to me.
Good.
Yeah, we figured.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank
Okay,
you.
Thanks. All right, I think that concludes our agenda tonight. And so with that, I adjourn the meeting. Thanks, everyone. Have a good month.
Good night, everyone.